What's up, Beardos? In today's episode, we're going to talk about addressing food insecurity and holding brands accountable with Kimberly Renee, the creator of Food Love and Brands Behaving Badly.
Basically, our whole philosophy boils down to don't be a jerk.
Let me answer your question first by not answering your question. I really hope people didn't tune in to hear us talk about beards. Beards. About beards.
What does that mean, Paul? The fake beans and the fake brown red bull.
Who knows, Andy? I don't know.
Welcome to the show. I'm Andy.
And I'm Paul.
And we are The Bearded Vegans, a podcast featuring a dissection of all things vegan.
If you're just tuning in for the first time, you can find all our previous episodes at thebeardedvegans.com, and you can reach us by emailing thebeardedvegans@gmail.com.
You know, Paul, normally this is the place that I would insert some little quip about the episode ahead, but not in much of a joking mood right now because sadly we are recording this less than 48 hours after the horrific attack in Atlanta in which a white terrorist shot and killed 8 people, including 6 Asian women. And so by the time this episode is actually released, there will likely have been more developments and more details released and thoughtful commentary from those who are more directly affected by anti-Asian racism and white supremacy.
So we don't want to take up any more space in this conversation, but of course we condemn this attack and our hearts go out to all those affected. And we also wanted to acknowledge that white supremacy is a problem in mainstream veganism, and anti-Asian rhetoric is often allowed to develop unchecked. And this manifests in things such as focusing on the meat consumption of Asian countries or painting certain cultural practices as more barbaric than those of the United States, as well as the white saviorism present in the erasure of Asian vegan activists that are actually doing the work in their home country. So as white people, it is our duty to dismantle white supremacy, which includes calling these practices out when we see them.
Absolutely. We got to make sure that we are focusing on our own backyard. So, Paul, with that said, we do have an excellent interview for everybody today. I'm talking with Kimberly Renee, and if you are not familiar with Kimberly's work, you are about to be. Kimberly does a lot of things, and we're going to get into several of those things in the interview, but we're definitely not going to even have the time to touch on all of them. So, you know, Kimberly is a self-taught private chef, the founder of Might Be Vegan, the creator of the Meats to Beats Challenge. The web series Might Be Vegan presents The Trap Kitchen. Kimberly did the world's largest vegan-only tailgate, which served over 1,500 people at no cost to people in the city of Atlanta. And the list just goes on and on and on. And it's the work that Kimberly is doing is, I think, very impressive.
Yeah, no, Andy, I was listening to this interview and I was just, my mind continued to be blown as to how a single person can do all of these things, can get all these projects done. And it made me feel like I should be doing more.
No, Paul, I definitely felt the same way. And I think that, you know, the work that Food Love is doing, the work that Brands Behaving Badly is doing is incredibly important. But this interview, I think, hopefully just serves as a really strong reminder of the power that each individual has. You know, when you think about what Kimberly has accomplished with a computer, with a couple of phone calls and some public posts and things like that, it's very impressive. And I think it's very inspiring. And I think it's a good lesson for activists out there, regardless of what issues you want to be working on.
For sure, Andy. So shall we tarry no further and get into this interview?
Tarry no further?
I've specifically said that because I feel like there was another time where you called me out on it, and I feel like I Googled it afterwards, and it is an expression.
Well then, Paul, let's tarry no further and let's get into it with Kimberly Renee. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Andy.
So on the Might Be Vegan website, it states that you are anything but one-dimensional. And honestly, that feels kind of like an understatement because you are working on this hunger relief program, Food Love, that we'll be talking all about today. You're also doing this work to hold brands accountable for paying content creators. You're doing this really amazing investigative work. And you have this whole other list of titles: actor, activist, storyteller, private chef, and so much more. So, I guess just to get everyone introduced to you, where did all of this start? How did you get involved in activism and veganism? What was that journey like for you?
Oh my gosh, Andy, that's so many pieces. I think each one of those has its own story, but let me see if I can condense it down. So being a part of the vegan slash plant based movement, I think I've always have been on this journey because in my mind, I've been health conscious since very young, being mindful of the things that I'm consuming, partly because of my the older adults in my family often not often, they all have diet related preventable illnesses, all of them. And I did not want that to be my life, so I made a decision very young to commit to eating better. And so eating plant-based, eating whole foods became that next iteration for me. Even though it wasn't as simple as, okay, yay, we're gonna give up chicken now. And I did it. It was definitely not that simple. It was a journey, it was a process. And once I made the switch, I then realized how much of an impact that my choices were having on so many more people and beings than just me. And so it became more than just me eating healthy. It became activism. It became a way that I could say this is a political stance now. I am doing this for not only my personal health, I am doing it for the people who live in neighborhoods where CAFOs are, who are being poisoned by the environmental impact that those factory farms have. I'm doing this for the animals. I'm doing this for the Great Barrier Reef that's dying because we're polluting the air. Like, I'm doing this for everybody and there's no going back. So it was progressive. Now, when it comes to like food and cooking and all of that, I've always been in the kitchen. I think my family has always had food, and I think that's common for many families. Is food is how we celebrate. Food is what brings us together. And my grandmother was that woman in our community where families would come when they didn't have enough or if they just wanted some good food. So I think I inherited a little bit of that from her because once I got into college, I started experimenting, and it went from putting weird things together and like bribing my roommates to taste it to actually then being that friend that roommates and then neighbors would call to say, "Hey, I'm having a little get together. Can you come over and cook for us?" And so that's kind of how my love for food was expressed in a unique way and kind of brought me to the community of um, being a private chef.
And as far as the activism goes, I guess you could say that the food you were making was a part of that. And now it seems like there's an even more outward expression of it that you're doing with Food Love, which, I'll let you explain it, of course. But, it's about getting food to people who need it. So what is the backstory on that?
Yes, definitely there is a connection between, the story of my grandmother and how she was that person. But if I'm honest, Andy, I actually started feeding people before I was in the kitchen. I think I was maybe 10 or 11 years old, and I was a parishioner at one of the largest, predominantly Black churches in the town where I'm from. And I realized that my church didn't have a food pantry. Now, I don't know how I knew that at 10 and 11. I don't know why my thinking was like that. I don't know where it came from. I, I honestly just don't have a good enough memory to like take myself back there. But I do remember asking my pastor if I could start something. I'm like, can I do this? Now imagine a kid coming up to you saying, can we start a new program? And this is your church and you're what, 60 years old and you've got a little kid trying to tell you what to do. So, I mean, he was down for it. I actually started quite a few programs at my church before I was 15. We did it was a tour of colleges for kids. We took, personal trips. I'm telling you all of that so you understand that I've always had that sense of entrepreneurship and the sense of doing. So feeding people and getting food to them, whether it was a food pantry or now a national program that can deliver food to anybody just about anywhere in the States, it's all connected and it's always been a part of me.
Wow. And, the more that I learn about your journey just from following your Instagram, from listening to other interviews that you've done, I think that what you've accomplished really speaks to the power of what one person can get done when they're just determined. And, of course, not that you haven't had help from other people and volunteers and all of that, but I think it's really powerful to hear what can get done when an individual notices that there is a need and then decides that they're going to do something about it. And I think a lot of us feel kind of powerless or like we're just one person, we can't do anything. And so hearing your story hopefully will serve as inspiration to others that, we can get things done, even just as one person, even just from like our computer. And, just looking at how far Food Love now reaches. Food Love is helping people in the lower 48 states. So, again, I think it's really powerful. And I'd love to hear the story of how that all got started.
Yes, definitely. And it wasn't an easy one to begin with. Honestly, I was very nervous about doing it. I was scared. And there are very few moments in my life where I can say that I'm afraid. And I wasn't afraid because I felt like, the task is too big for me. I was maybe a little bit anxious about that. No, I'm a lot a bit anxious about that. But I was scared because I didn't want to commit to something and have someone depending on me and not be able to deliver. Like that would have really just broke my heart. So I had to figure out a way to create this program, Food Love, which I'm not sure if I said exactly what it is yet, but it is a hunger relief program. It is 100% plant based. We have the capacity to feed anyone, as you said, in the lower 48 states. And we do that through brand partnerships. Ultimately, Food Love is a technology solution to a logistics problem. We recognize that many people don't have access. And so, what we do is we come in the middle, we form a connection, and then we build that connection such that people can have access. So, I was afraid that if I committed to this thing and I raised my hand and said, me, this one person over here, this is what I'm going to do, and then it failed, I would have felt like a disappointment to myself and to the other people that I was trying to serve. So, I first had to figure out how to get over that idea. And then also, how is this going to work? And then me still stay at home because honestly, I didn't want to go outside because there was this whole thing called coronavirus. Not sure if you've heard about it, but I didn't want to go out and potentially expose myself to coronavirus and then potentially bring that home to my mom because I was staying with her during that period. And as I said before, my mom has diet related preventable illnesses. And so that put her at greater risk for more negative outcomes if she were to contract COVID-19. So I had to figure out how I was going to do this without leaving my house. And so I started to think about all of what I understood about marketing technology and figured out a way to at least test the idea. And so I tested it with a friend of mine who was near me at the time, who I knew was a social worker. And I asked her, I said, so do you happen to have people right now who maybe don't have transportation and like they want to go to a food bank, but they can't? So maybe they're like hungry. Like, do you have people that like that? And she was like, oh my God, yes. And so she was like, yes, I have like 20. I was like, really? She was like, yes. I'm like, okay, so let's try this project. I don't know if it's going to work, but send me, like, get permission to send me their information, and then I'm going to send them some food. At that point, we had no money. So this is me figuring it out with my own limited funds and, begging people to, like, can you send me this product and that product? So we tested it, it worked. The families were super grateful for it. And that just kind of sent me on the trajectory to attempt to scale it. And scale it in a way that also allowed us to manage our resources because unlike, say, feeding America, we don't have millions and billions of dollars to feed people. Like, that's just, the program is new, we just have limited resources. So I didn't want, again, to commit to serving someone and not being able to do it. So we had to figure out, how can we scale this slowly while still serving anyone anywhere? And so that's what we figured out how to do through marketing technology, through relationships, through a whole bunch of volunteers that we started with. But those volunteers actually were able to teach me the things that we needed in order to close certain gaps that technology could fill. And so as they would work on things and I would see the different tasks that they would repeat, I would say, okay, now how can we take that and have technology do that for us instead? And so literally we're stitching it together as we're going.
And I want to get into the real nitty gritty details about how this program works. So, if there is somebody who is out there and they are hungry and they need assistance, how do they first get connected to Food Love?
Yeah, for sure. So when we talk about scalability, it's really important to remember that we don't have the funds to literally feed everybody every single day. We don't. That's just, it's not reasonable. So we had to figure out how we can reach people and also vet them without it being weird, because I didn't want to ask people, can you prove that you're in need? Because that's just like the most awkward thing to ask. And it's so uncomfortable. And I don't think it's appropriate. So the question that I asked myself was, who knows who's in need? Like, who in our community is, like, connected to people who are struggling? Like, is there a company? Is there a job? Who is it? And that led me to social workers, caseworkers, hospitals, places where nutritionists work, dietitians. These are the people that are often up close and personal with people's needs. Even schools, for example, schools, the social workers within their school. And so that's who we leaned into. And that also allowed us to grow at a rate that made it such that we could meet the needs that were being presented to us. And so currently, we have a very large network of case and social workers that refer us families. And when the families are referred, we don't ask questions because we don't have to, because we know the job of the social worker and the caseworker, for example, is to be up close and personal with that family. So from there, that's how the food is processed and delivered and how we make decisions on who gets served.
And of course, the other big piece of that puzzle is the food itself. So, where does it come from?
Yes. So we work with quite a few meal delivery companies, and we're always looking to expand that. We've had some companies come on for a short period, then cycle off, and then obviously we're interested in cycling them back on. But some examples of the brands that we've worked with, Splendid Spoon is one of our first partners. They were actually our first partner. Voice Mode, they're actually a regional partner serving New York and New Jersey. We've worked with Light Life, I believe that's how you say it, and Field Roast. We've worked with Aura Organic. We've worked with, there's so many. I'm going to actually refer people to the website so that you can see the list. We have other regional ones like Modern Love, which some people know from New York or Omaha. They work with us. And so what we do is we first find out where the family is located. So we look for their state. Then we look for obviously the city. And if we have a local or regional partner that can serve them, then they will serve them first. If that area does not have a local or regional partner, then we go to one of our national partners. And so that's how the food is delivered to them. It's either directly from a local restaurant, a local meal delivery company, or shipped directly via FedEx, UPS, whatever that is, directly to their doors in a box.
And what was the process of actually getting these big companies and brands to sign on and actually provide food to the program?
Oh my Lord. Andy, that's such a crazy question because honestly, the first time I did the outreach, asking brands to participate, nobody said yes. Like everybody said no. It was so frustrating that I was literally in tears because one of the things that I didn't tell you, Andy, was that I actually tried to avoid thinking about creating this project, but it was following me in my dreams. Like I would wake up and be like, why am I dreaming about this project? Like I'm trying not to do it because I am so scared. I don't know if this is going to work. This could be like a train wreck, but I couldn't escape it. And so because I couldn't escape it, I started moving forward, very tentatively, just like, okay, let me see if this little bit works. And so when I started asking brands and they all said no, I was like, see, I told you this could not work. Oh my God, it could not work. It's like, this is the end, it is over. And so I'm in tears, not merely because of the rejection, but because of just how much of a weight I felt from this entire experience. Like just this idea, just it had so much weight on me emotionally. And so when all these brands said no, what really stood out to me is that part of my pitch was that this is going to focus on some historically marginalized communities. Aside from low income, we're also talking about BIPOC communities that often live in food apartheid, who do not have access. And then you couple that with the fact that they are dying at twice the rate of their white counterparts because of many of these diet related preventable illnesses. Can you help me by at least getting some food to them to give some temporary help, and to have someone, not just once, twice, but many times come back and say, no, we just helped some doctors and we gave lunches to doctors. I was just like, are you serious? Like, the doctors have jobs, not to say that we don't value them. They are critical for our lives. They are critical members of our community, and they are super important just right now. But that's not a need. They can go to the store or the grocery store or order food off of Uber Eats. They have money. Well, I guess unless you look at how much student debt they have, that's a whole other conversation. Long story short, they have a job and they probably are not food insecure. But what I am pitching is a need. And I wasn't getting any yeses. So I called a friend of mine, still in tears because I had told her about this idea. And I was like, it's just not gonna work. I can't do it. Nobody has said yes. We've reached out to about 50 meal prep companies and nobody is interested. And I feel like they're not only rejecting the idea, but they're literally rejecting Black people again. Because that's really the crux of what I was trying to say, is that Black people, Indigenous people, people of color are being harmed right now, and worse than others. And I'm trying to do something, and you're rejecting us again. And that's what it felt like. And so on the phone with my friend, I said, I kind of quit. And she said, before you hang up the towel, I want you to remember what you're really good at. She said, you are an impeccable storyteller and a fantastic writer. So what I want you to do is stop, breathe, and then write a rebuttal. And so, I wiped my face off, pulled out my laptop, got myself together, and wrote a rebuttal. And it was that rebuttal. I sent it really only to one brand to start with, just to kind of see how it went. And that was actually Splendid Spoon. And their response to the rebuttal was, you're right, let's do it. And so then I cried some more because we had a small win. But that was the beginning of the journey. So long story short, harassment is how we got these brand partnerships. And lots of emails and lots of direct messages and all of that.
And what about brands that don't sell or offer, complete meal kits, as it were? What if there's a company that just offers like a specific food product, or maybe even a company that doesn't offer food at all? Are you able to find ways for them to get involved?
Yes, of course. So we haven't really led with that as much because we've been super focused on making sure that a brand, or rather a family, has a full meal as opposed to lots of random things that they don't know how to put together. Because I think we have to remember that the families we are serving are not necessarily vegan. So sending them like a thing of tofu, I fear it might end up in the trash because they don't know what to do with it, right? So instead of focusing on the smaller brands, we led with the full meal prep companies. But recently, we figured out ways that we can bring on brands that have single products or just a group of products that may not be full meals. And that is through something that we're going to start probably in April, where we're doing cooking classes for our families. So that gives us an opportunity to have another touch point with them, to send them some product, and then also walk them through what to do with the thing that they now have. So that was the piece that was really missing for me is, okay, what do you do with this? And so now we have a medium where that can happen.
I love the idea of incorporating the cooking classes, and that leads me to wonder about the future of Food Love and just sort of, what kind of place do you feel like Food Love has in the context of food sovereignty? Do you view this as sort of a one-off emergency relief effort, or would you like to see it grow into something larger and maybe become something that is a part of people's daily lives? How are you looking at that? Do you have any bigger plans of that nature?
Yes, I mean, you should know by now, Andy, that I'm always thinking about something. So I am excited about what is next for Food Love. I am not certain right now if it's going to become its own organization. Honestly, right now, the idea of managing two companies is stressful for me. So for now, our focus is to keep the program under Might Be Vegan, but look at what it means to utilize some of our learnings over the past year and some change to support other organizations and the efforts that they are looking to do in their community, and using our technology to do that. So right now our technology is not its own unique kind of program. It's literally just some things that have been stitched together using multiple marketing automation platforms. But once we have an opportunity to build our own custom platform, that may be something that other nonprofits could use to reach more families themselves. So that's one thing, like at a basic level. The other way of kind of helping other organizations is helping them just to think about how they're serving families differently. Because right now, so many food banks depend on people just coming to their door to ask for food. And there hasn't necessarily been any outreach to find out who outside of our regular service community may be in need. So this program also helps them to think in different ways. Even bigger than that, we have the opportunity to talk about how we can scale what we're doing in partnership with local providers to feed even more people through grant dollars. So building processes around helping more people is what we've proven to be good at, because it's not just because Food Love isn't just another food bank. It's literally a process. It's technology. And so how now can we apply that across the board to think about solving the issue of food insecurity, to where we're giving people, not just one set of meals, but multiple meals. And then beyond that, how do we address food insecurity permanently? Because again, we're talking about a logistics issue. It's not necessarily that we don't have enough food, there's enough food to go around. But how do we then make sure that people have permanent access and affordable access to food? And so that's kind of the outgrowth of, how do we look at it from, helping smaller businesses and smaller nonprofits to bigger nonprofits, to now building outward to solving a big issue that, has been ongoing.
I love that. And just to sort of pull back and look at the larger context of everything we've been talking about, you've already spoken to a bunch of aspects of this already, but just to sort of more pointedly get at it, Food Love has this focus on Black, Indigenous, and people of color and other historically marginalized groups. So I'm wondering, how do you see the mission of Food Love, which is addressing food insecurity and racial justice, intersecting with veganism?
I think there is a misconception outside of the vegan community that the only way to be healthy is to have a balance of dairy, meat, vegetables, grains, all of that. That information has been provided to us by people who are less interested in our health and more interested in money. Right now, when you look at BIPOC communities, by and large, they have unhealthier options and fewer healthier options. I know those, it sounded like I said the same thing twice, but not really. So, one I would call a food swamp, meaning you've got a bunch of crap in your area. You've got McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Church's Chicken, this pizza shop, yada, yada. You got all of that. So, it's a lot of junk. And then you don't have access as often to fresh produce. And so, when you combine those things together and you look at often how much money you're making, whether you're minimum wage or barely above, it's like, how do you afford even the stuff that is available to you in your neighborhood? And when we talk about how all of these things intersect, meat has been given priority as far as subsidies. So ultimately, we're paying tax dollars to feed ourselves the crap that's harming us. So this whole ecosystem is quite icky. I know that's like such a college level word, but it's just it's gross. The fact that we use tax dollars to offset the cost of things that can harm us, that we put in our bodies. And then we see these disparities in our communities where there are almost literal redlined areas that have fewer resources and fewer healthy options. And that is the root of this redlining that people can, research once they stop listening to the podcast, but listen to the whole podcast first. You can go, the redlining is this idea that these areas were marked off by government and certain resources were not allowed or were restricted from the people who live there. As simple as a loan for a house and the value of your house. It's a whole long story. Please go Google it later. Long story short, because of this practice of redlining by the government and perpetuated by industry, we now have segregated areas with fewer resources, and this segregation is by often race. So this is how these areas intersect, because one, a life of plant-based eating can address some of the health issues that have been perpetuated by the poor eating habits that are the result of areas that have been concentrated with poor quality food. So it's all threaded together. Hopefully that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. And for anyone that wants to get involved with the work you're doing, specifically with Food Love, either volunteering or donating, what do you have a need for at this time, and how can people listening help out?
Yes. So right now we have 7 dedicated volunteers. I make 8, and they each have a specific task that they work on. As we expand programming, we're going to need additional volunteers to help us execute, and so we are always looking for volunteers. It doesn't mean that if you reach out to me today that I'll be able to say yes, I have something for you to do, because we've worked really hard to use automation to make our tasks fewer. But for those who do have financial means, we do have a GoFundMe, and I want to explain how we use those funds, because some people are confused because I say many times that we ask corporations to step up, and we do. So Our corporations, our businesses, they commit to a certain amount of food that they can fit within their budget and that they pay the cost of shipping, the cost of the food, everything. We don't give them any money for what they've committed to. But if we get to a moment in that week where we have more people than we have commitment from the brands, we will then pay a brand to feed that family. So that's how we use the GoFundMe funds. If you work at a brand, for example, that has a product that is a plant based product that we can get into the hands of people who are in need, and you're not a meal company, we're definitely looking for more of those because we do have that cooking class that will be launching very soon. And the other is amplification. Continuing to tell the story, continuing to recognize where the disparities are, so that we can provide resources to address those inequities. So that's pretty much what we need.
And we'll, of course, put links to the ways that people can help your work in the show notes. And you've mentioned that a part of what Food Love is doing is asking corporations and brands to step up. So I kind of want to pivot a little bit and talk about a different way that you've been doing that recently, which mostly is taking the form of working to get brands to pay content creators instead of asking them to work for free or in exchange for product. But I first noticed this work when you were exposing a brand called Made with Melanin. The work you did there was truly inspiring, especially just with how much you got done just doing some online sleuthing and watching that whole situation unfold on your Instagram and also in a couple of YouTube videos was pretty incredible. So would you mind giving us a brief overview of what happened there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that might be my superpower because someone asked me in another interview, like, would you say that, like, food is your superpower? And I'm like, no, I think being like on the internet is my superpower. So let me explain how this started because it was a little bit unintentional. If you recall, I said something about reaching out to brands about partnering with us for Food Love. Well, I was working with a woman named Kelly, and she and I were about to do our next round of outreach for brands, and we needed a pitch that was going to capture their attention. And we had had some success with the original idea, talking about, what's really happening in the Black community and how that relates to food and COVID. But honestly, a lot of folks were kind of still ignoring us, and we needed something different. So something happened. George Floyd was murdered. And now all these brands are hyper aware of inequities in the Black community. And so I had this idea and I shared it with Kelly. And I said, what if we actually, instead of leading with the food love conversation, we actually go in and talk about what's actually happening right now in the news, because I know they're watching and some of them have like posted black squares. They're making all these statements. Like, what else are you going to do other than make these statements? Because the statements don't help us. I mean, we appreciate the statements, but what other action are you going to do? So we made a pitch to ask them, would you be interested in having a conversation around what you can do actively to play a role in anti-racism? And this isn't me just, coming off the cuff, like I'm just gonna, make something up as I go along and I'm all of a sudden an expert. Like, I've had so many lives. I don't have the time to tell you all of them. But one thing that I have been known for is writing about anti-racism. So I've written several pieces about it, several think pieces. I've done several interviews, and this was years before this George Floyd moment. So I knew I had something to say. And so I invited these brands for a conversation. And I knew that I gave them the caveat, we're going to talk about food love, but I also want you to be able to potentially get something out of this conversation. That led us to running into Bob's Red Mill. And Bob's Red Mill said, we're not interested in talking to anyone about anything. That was my first video. My first video was about Bob's Red Mill and how we were rejected from them. It wasn't just that they said no, because lots of brands said no, we're not interested at this time. Thank you though for reaching out. Very different than we're not interested in talking to anyone about anything. It's like, oh, okay, well that's different. So I started to do some research, and people were just enamored, like just super just engulfed with like, how did you find all this? This is interesting. Like, what is this? And there, I will tell you, I released the video at like 3 a.m. at some point in, I don't even remember what month it was, at like 3 a.m. By noon the next day, I had gotten an email from their president of marketing. And he said, I think we have a misunderstanding. And I said, oh, do we? Okay, well, how can I help you? He was like, well, I'd love to, talk to you. I said, well, you only have 15 minutes because I offered you a 1 hour consultation for free. So now you're on my time. So you only get 15 minutes to say whatever you have to say. So that's what led to creating that video with Bob's Red Mill. And then from Bob's Red Mill to that email conversation to then I said, well, since this was a public video, we need to do a public response. And what happened out of that was Bob's Red Mill committed to better hiring practices, better practices as it relates to how they showcase people of color. Because prior to now, every Black person, except for one, in their entire social media feed was somebody in need. And I said, did you not notice that? Every Black person you will have on here is somebody in need. And that wasn't you didn't notice. Nope, we didn't notice. Okay, now we have their attention. Now they've committed to change. And it actually has happened. Like I've watched them progress. And so that was the first moment where I realized I'm really good at harassing people. Like I feel like I could harass people into being better, like have some positive peer pressure here. But I just put that in my pocket, to be honest with you. I didn't like make some major plan about, who I was going to go after. Like I have other things to do. Obviously, I'm running a food program. And then that's when I ran into Made with Melanin. And that just rubbed me the wrong way. It was Made with Melanin. And I just had a hard time believing that there were any melanated people who were behind this brand. So I started to do some research, and that's Andy, what you saw. I just kind of went on the internet, started searching for things, and found a lot. And I published it. And after doing so many people were like, oh my gosh, this was like watching TV. This was the best. You need to keep doing this. And it has led to over, let's see, October, November, December, January, February. So 3.5 months later, Made with Melanin was shut down by Shopify because of the noise that we made and also the report that I sent Shopify. I think sometimes people don't realize how much extra effort sometimes goes into things. This wasn't just they shut it down because they found your video. Woohoo, congratulations. No. I spent days writing a 9-page report, collecting receipts, collecting invoices, collecting emails. And I put that together and submitted it to Shopify and said to them, please do not tell me that you are advocating for Black people when you allow this kind of trash on your platform. I need you to pay attention. And that's in so many words what I said. And I sent this as an email to pretty much their whole executive team because I'm just that crazy. I also sent it to their attorneys, and I also DM'd the president of their company because I'm like, I just need you to know that I'm a real person and I'm not trying to spam you. And I didn't spam them. I said, I'm going to email you one time, and then I'm asking that you send back whichever representative you want me to communicate with. Tell me who that is, and then we're going to get this addressed. Fast forward another 30 days. They then took down 4 other sites that were connected to these same guys that ran Made with Melanin. So honestly, I believe that these guys have made millions of dollars off of these scams. And the scams are basically where they lean into progressive causes and say that we're donating to causes when they don't actually really do that. If they have done it, it's like, oh, we sent $1,000 one time. But when you think about how much money they're making and how they're using chatbots and automation to convince people to work for free, that's when you realize that this is more than just a couple of $1,000s that they're making. This is millions of dollars that they're making off of these scams. And so I knew that somebody had to be held accountable. But the asking people to work for free piece is kind of what led into what you first asked me about, which is influencers, content creators being paid for their time. So I know I rambled a lot, so I'm going to pause there.
No, that's great. We'll, of course, put links to the videos you mentioned, the Bob's Red Mill, the Made with Melanin expose in the show notes. And I definitely recommend people go give them a watch to get the full story. It is seriously more riveting than TV. But I did want to leave people with some sense of what to look out for in this scam that was being pulled by Made with Melanin and a bunch of other connected companies, because we get comments on our Instagram. We'll post an episode and then get a random account saying something like, you'd be a great ambassador for our brand, contact our main page for more information. And I'd wager many of our listeners have also gotten DMs and comments like that as well. So what should people be looking out for, and how do you think that they should respond?
Yeah, I would say ignore all of those. Ignore every single one of those "you would be a great ambassador" comments, like just delete them. Because in most cases they're spamming people to try to get free work. Typically, legitimate brands that have money to spend will probably email you in most cases. If they don't email you, then they will come from their actual account and say what they're interested in. The reason that they have to use a different account, these other brands have to use different accounts, is because spamming breaks the terms of Instagram. Like, you're not supposed to spam people. So if a brand legitimately reaches out to you from its own page and says, we want to work with you, that brand is saying, we want to work with you, like you, because we're coming from our account. So if you get a spam message from a random account that says, go message me from another one, like, don't do that. Just don't. I mean, unless you just really want random free things. Also, if they send you random free things, you have no obligation to actually post. Why? Because you don't have an agreement. Like, I think that's the other thing that people forget. Now, mind you, I am not attorney. Please do not accept this as legal advice. But I will say that sending me a DM without an agreement, where I have to do something, is mostly a suggestion. Like, this is we have not signed papers. So yeah, so that's the other thing. So I would just be, anytime a brand reaches out to you, Google their name plus the word scam. See what pops up. And then also Google them with the word review and see what pops up.
Well, there you go. So yeah, let's talk about this phenomenon of brands asking content creators to work for free. This is something you've been posting a lot about on your personal Instagram, as well as under the moniker Brands Behaving Badly. So what's going on there?
Yes. So honestly, Andy, somebody caught me on a bad day. They caught me on a bad day, and I was like, you know what? I am tired of this. I am tired of it. I know that I am not the only one. And so they just so happened to be the one that got the feisty me in an email response. So I sent them a message and then said, please stop doing this. Please stop asking content creators to work for free. It's not right. It's not right. So I decided that I just wanted to tell everybody about all of them. And everybody who had sent me, every brand that had reached out to me to ask me to create content for free, I published their names and tagged them. And for a while, I called them thieves for a while on my social feed, where we had like a highlight called thieves. And that publishing went on for a good 24 hours because other content creators started reaching out to me and following me. Like, I had news outlets reaching out to me. It was a lot over that like 24-hour period of like the lifetime of those stories. BuzzFeed reached out to me. I think the editor of 17 now follows me. Like, it's a whole lot going on, right? So what happened after these posts went live, some brands reached out and wanted to have a conversation. Others were like, what are you even talking about? Like, why are you talking about this? Because like they signed up to work for free. Like, what do you mean? Like, this is America. I'm like, you're right, it is America, which is awful. Like, that's the problem. The problem is you think that because someone is willing to work for free that you should not offer them money. It's like when you go to a restaurant and you buy food, like the expectation is that you're going to pay for the food. If they then give it to you for free, then okay, cool, right? That's awesome. That's icing. That's icing. But no, do not stop doing that. Stop doing that. So I realized that I did not want to overwhelm my social media presence with all this brand stuff because I am like a human that has other interests besides this. So I moved the project itself to the Brands Behaving Badly social handle, which had previously been the place for holding Made with Melanin accountable. So I redid the bio as you would expect, and now that has a focus on brands that reach out to content creators and ask them to work for free. Because it's one thing when you reach out to a brand and you say, "Hey, I'm interested in product," and they say, "Oh, we don't have a budget right now, but if you are interested in posting about us, I can send you some free product." That's completely different. You know, assuming that they're telling the truth, that's different because you've reached out to them. But for me, if you have reached out to me to ask me for work, to work for you, but you don't have a check to go with it, like that's what is that? Like who does that? Oh wait, all of America, which is why we're calling it out, right? This is the reason that we're speaking up because it's not appropriate to invite people to work for free. Like minimum wage even is too low. We all know that, but you should at least be offering that for a person's time. Like that's just, you should at least be offering that. So what happened next was a website because I had way too many brands and I needed to keep track of them and I knew everybody wanted to know who they were. So I created a database and now people can submit brands that we then just review. The people who submit brands are required to include verification. So you've got to show me emails, you've got to show me timestamps, the communication, that whole thing. So we always verify them that way. And then once we verify them and then try to have a conversation with the brand to give them an opportunity to respond before we put them in public. If we don't hear from them, then it's like, okay, cool, no worries. But we also let people know that, like, if a brand is not in communication with us or with me rather, and they haven't said anything, then the status shows inactive. If they've opened the door to talk, then the status shows conversation open. And if they've committed to making changes, then it's going to say changes underway. And if they've made a public commitment to those changes, then it's going to say public commitment made. So that's what we're looking at. And we're looking to actually see change. And so far we have, which is amazing because we've had at least maybe 5 or 6 brands so far after 2 weeks of doing this that have said we will no longer ask people to work for free. Now, that doesn't mean that if somebody approaches us, we have to pay them because money just doesn't run like that. But if we reach out to them, we will come with a check. That's a change. And that's what we're hanging our hat on, brands that have actually made that commitment.
And I've seen a lot of people responding to this saying, well, what is the problem with working in exchange for product? You know, all you have to do is get sent the thing, take a picture of it, and then you get this thing for free. Wouldn't a lot of people do that? So why are people so upset about only being offered product in exchange for a post?
I would say, did you say that to the photographer that you hired to do your product imagery? Did you say that I'm going to only pay you in product? Or did you value what the photographer was doing? Because I think people like just miss the idea that, okay, just because it's a cell phone or just because it's coming through an app, that they think it's not worth money. So yes, obviously we are not as skilled. Some of us are, but I'm not. I'm not as skilled as a photographer. I hire photographers all the time. But I think we also have to remember that we're not just being a photographer. We're also being the actor, the model. We're writing the copy. We are styling the scene, which often photographers will hire somebody else to do. We're also functioning as hair and makeup. As an aside, I work as a commercial actor as well. So I've been on sets before for selling product. My whole job as an actor is to show up, sit in a chair, let somebody play on my face and put some makeup on it, make my hair look good. They give me an outfit. I go on set, I smile, I hold things, they snap pictures, and then I leave. But on that set was not just me. There was the makeup artist, there was the stylist, there was the hair person, there was the photographer, there was the editor, there was the director of photography, there was the person who was over the project, who was deciding exactly the theme that we're going to go with. When you're talking about social media posts, we are all of those people. The problem is we don't get a fraction of that money. I'm not saying that you should give us the collection of all of that. That would be crazy. However, we deserve a fraction of it, a piece of it, not just the product, because the product, we're going to have to use it anyway. At the end of the day, you can have it back. You want it back, I'll mail it to you. Just send me a self-addressed stamped envelope and I will put it in the box, put it in the mailbox. I'll send it via FedEx, whatever you want. Give me your FedEx account. Whatever it is, you can have the product back. The only thing I want is the cash money for my time and for my effort.
Great response. And I actually want to talk about your Patreon, because it is a place people can go there, just throw $5 your way every month if they appreciate the work you're doing. But there's also a lot more happening there. You're using it in a different way than I think a lot of people are normally expecting Patreon creators to do. So tell us about your Patreon.
Yes, for sure. So this kind of work doesn't come with a paycheck. Nobody is paying me to hold a brand accountable to implementing better practices. Like, nobody paid me to make a video for Bob's Red Mill. At that time, my YouTube wasn't even monetized. So like YouTube wasn't even paying me for it. So, but it takes a lot of time. Aside from the research itself, one of the things that happens behind the scenes is I actually feel quite a bit of communication, especially from journalists. So I'm on the phone having a conversation with the journalist. The journalist gets paid to write the article, but I don't get paid as a source. That's not how this stuff works. So I created Patreon to not only create a space for people to say, hey, I support what you're doing, this is valuable, but also to have a space to run through some of what we talked about in those 1 hour consultations that we talked about from last year that we were having with all those brands except Bob's Red Mill. So it's a wonderful thing because there's a space for small businesses to come in and learn how they can play an active role in actual steps. Like, this is a thing you can do. This is how you can make a change. And then they have a community of people that can work with them who are like-minded, that also want to make similar changes. But then there's also one section that I call my accountability superheroes. And they're the ones who get all the gossip before everybody gets the gossip. And it's real gossip, not like fake gossip where you're just, meddling, but the information about the things that are getting ready to be published. So, for example, we have our fingers crossed about a piece that's going to be coming out in a major publication about all of this work around Made with Melanin. And so that's pending, and it's huge if we're able to get all the things that we need to get to tell that full story. So that's all I can say about that. But then I'm also hoping that there's more news around brands like Pink, Lily, and Curls, and some of the other brands that are on the list. Maybe not Curls, because Curls has opened the conversation, but some of those other brands that have just flat out refused to make any changes. And maybe there's an opportunity for stories there, because what we have seen consistently is, I know that so many people are frustrated with cancel culture. That's not what this is. This is not cancel culture. This is call you out, then let's be friends, then let's make change so we can be better culture. That's what this is. Because every single brand that I talk to, there's not animosity, or at least that's not the intention. The intention is, hey, here's a problem. If I scream it loud enough, then maybe you'll pay attention and take it seriously. And then from there, how can we make change? How can we how can we be better? And honestly, most of the brands that we've actually spoken to have been open. We've only had one brand that will remain nameless that has been very rude and disgusting in my inbox. Like a whole new level of let's take this outside and fight kind of level. So this isn't easy work. There's a lot of emotion that kind of runs, and I do my very best to still be to remain cordial. But yeah, like I've definitely got those kind of like, well, I could sue you for this. I'm like, well, you could, but you can't. You can't sue me for telling the truth. These are my emails. Like you can try though. I mean, hey. So yeah, so that's kind of my life. I know I feel like I'm rambling now, Andy. So help me rein me in, please.
Well, I personally live for the ramble, so I am loving it. But you've been very generous with your time. So as we kind of wrap things up, I wanted to ask you about preventing burnout for yourself because you are seemingly just doing so much all the time. So do you have a way of dealing with burnout?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. Um, Honestly, I feel like my right now in this moment, my body has decided that I need to sleep longer. So I, for the past week or so, like I've been sleeping maybe 9, 10 hours as opposed to my typical 6 to 7. And I think that's really just my body's way of dealing with all of what's happening. So I've got to be mindful of that. I think the other piece is because I don't go to work every day, I have the capacity to set my own pace. And it's something that I've worked really hard to be able to do. After my first job out of college, I did not understand the idea of people going to work 9 to 5 every day and then like having to come home and like cook for kids and then maybe have a relationship and then giving assignments over the weekend because then where I was working at that time they wanted me to travel. I'm like, so you want me to travel on weekends to go to a new location to start on Monday, so you've taken my entire week. Like what if I had babies? Like what if I had a man? Like what is going on? So I have always been like anti 9 to 5. Like I'm not that person. So it's taken me a while to get to a place where I have the financial stability to be able to work my own schedule. And I think that helps me to not go bonkers, because I get to decide when I work. And sometimes there are days where I'm just like, nope, we're not doing anything. Like just nothing. It's couch and Netflix. That's it. So I'm grateful to have also a support system of people that I can reach out to be like, I'm flipping out right now. Can we just chat for a good hour just to kind of help my brain reset? And it's been even more difficult having to be inside and also process all of that as well, because you're not able to connect with people in the way that I'm not able to connect with people in the way that I have been accustomed to. I'm the type of person that'll just like pop up at a bar and like make 10 new friends and now we got a whole party going on. I can't do that now.
Mm-hmm.
So I pace myself. And that's really the best that I can do. And find support. I think that's another key is just being able to get other people involved who say they want to be involved and pass on tasks. I mean, I could do everything, but then I'd be bonkers, and then ineffective at everything. So I try my best to pass things along.
It's always interesting to hear how people respond to that question. So, where can people find you? Social media, websites, anything like that that you would like to point people towards to connect with you?
Yeah. So I have TikTok. Nobody loves me on TikTok, probably because I don't post on it. But if you just so happen to be a TikToker and maybe that one day I might post something, I am on TikTok. It's Kimberly Renee. My primary though is Instagram. So it's Kimberly Renee there. Patreon, it's Kimberly Renee there. And then Kimberly Renee on YouTube. So those are my social handles.
Well, Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to share your story and your knowledge with us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me again, Andy.
All right, welcome back. We hope you enjoyed that interview. And, we briefly mentioned this last week, but just to remind people, we are currently doubling donations to Food Love. So for the next 9 episodes, if you donate to Food Love, take a pic of that receipt, email it into thebeardedvegans@gmail.com, and we will double it up to our pool of $200.
Absolutely. And I hope you go and check out all the resources in the show notes. Definitely recommend giving Kimberly a follow on the old Instagram. It's Kimberly Renee. It's is actually a part of the name. It's Kimberly Renee on Instagram. So much good stuff happening there. And if you had been following over the last couple of weeks, in the time between I had initially recorded this interview, there's been some major developments, and some really large companies have decided to change their policies on how they're paying their content creators, including Canva, which is just an absolutely huge company. So a lot of really great stuff happening over there. And of course, if you have any thoughts on this episode or suggestions, questions for future episodes, you can email us, thebeardedvegans@gmail.com. Paul.
Yes, Andy?
What are we doing next week?
Andy, next week we're reviewing Seaspiracy, the long-awaited film, or I guess / the film that we thought had already come out, but that's neither here nor there because it is finally out March 24th. So it's probably out right now by the time you're listening to this. Now, we have not watched it yet at the time that we're saying these words, so there quite possibly might be some graphic footage. So I guess, be warned about that. But yep, we'll definitely let you know next week in our review.
Absolutely. And that'll be available on Netflix for those playing along at home. If you want to roll those dice and give it a watch before you know what we think about it. But in the meantime, Paul, something that is never a roll of the dice is hearing you say the following 7 words.
We are the Bearded Vegans, signing off. Welcome back, Andy. I sincerely hope everyone enjoyed.
You welcoming me back?
Yeah, I know.